Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. This is a really important narrative to pay attention to after everything we saw with Helene and Milton. And of course, this is problem, reaction, solution. But I bet this is probably one that many people out there didn't think they would hear. But if you understand what they're trying to do with destroying infrastructure, then it makes perfect sense, right? As parts of Florida went dark from Helene and Milton, the lights stayed on in this net zero storm-proof community because, of course, now net zero storm-proof green energy is apparently safer, it's better, and they'll start using propaganda like this to convince people out there that it's more beneficial in so many different ways for us to get to net zero carbon emissions. And of course, this is nothing more than propaganda. In fact, it's very, very clear if you understand what they're doing with the weather. They clearly steered the storms very, very, very much around this specific area. They manipulated it so it wouldn't hit this specific area because, of course, this is exactly what they need to start spreading after a hurricane like this, is getting people even more on board with green energy. Now, what they won't tell you is that a lot of people who had electric cars parked in their garage, well, their homes caught fire, because that's the type of news that they don't really want you paying attention to, right? If you're not familiar, a lot of these electric vehicles tend to explode like bombs during hurricanes or during any type of actual flooding. But for now, the propaganda has to be storm-proof community, because this immediately plants seeds in people's heads that if we could build these storm-proof communities, we could all be safe from this weather. But what these people fail to realize is that all these weather phenomenons are happening because we're under assault from our own government. And the result of that assault, if they don't kill you, is for you to eventually cave in, or be forced in, I should say, into living in one of these net zero storm-proof enslavement communities. And these people literally are living in a dystopia. Anyone out there that thinks that this is beneficial to humanity, what you have to understand about the net zero stuff is that people hear it and they don't get it at all. And like I keep mentioning about the alt-right media, they talk about, well, these people just want to make a lot of money because they're invested in green energy. This is enslavement. This is rationing at its finest. These communities that run on net zero, that run on green energy, you will be living like a prisoner in a prison cell, just instead it'll be called a community. You'll be rationing electricity, but you'll be thankful that you have it in the first place, because you'll just be glad that you have electricity. You'll be glad that you have a home, a roof over your head. What you fail to realize is that you might as well have just become a prisoner and went away to jail, because it's the same exact thing, because all the problems that are happening by design, via sabotage. So this is an article from CNN. The developers of the new Hunters Point community, Pearl Homes, build the property as the first net zero single family home development in the U.S., meaning residents produce more energy from solar panels than they need, with the excess energy either being stored or sold back to the grid in a state where most electricity is generated by burning natural gas, a plant-warming fossil fuel. And again, another one of the mindsets they're going to have in this dystopia is people are going to say, well, it's more than we need, so we can share it with others, which of course is a perfectly fine mindset if this was actually happening organically. The problem is that it's not happening organically. We have an overabundance of energy that we already can use, that we don't need to share with one another. Of course, they charge us out the rear end for the price of electricity these days, but these are all things that they're doing by design. Now, if we were all starting from scratch and we didn't have anything in place and we were building something out, we'd all say, hey, yeah, let's, we have X amount of energy, let's share it with each other. But if you found out that the government was doing this via sabotage, then you probably would start to be angry and say, well, we don't need to live like this. We don't have to live like this. But they want you to feel like, well, you have to live like this. This is the only solution, because the problems out there keep occurring with carbon emissions, but they don't actually keep occurring. The government's creating all of these problems so that you live like a prisoner. So somehow, isn't that convenient that these developers at Hunters Point community, right nestled between Sarasota Bay and southwestern Tampa, isn't it convenient that this is the first net zero single family home development in the US and it didn't get wiped out by the hurricanes. So do you understand how this works when they talk about being able to steer the weather? What was the quote of Bill Gates? Wasn't Bloomberg calling him the hurricane tamer? Why were they calling him the hurricane tamer? Oh, because these people have already admitted in the past that they have the ability to steer these storms where they want to steer them. So why in the world would they actually hit one of their net zero communities? Now, the people who have created this community, I'm sure, are 33rd degree Freemasons, probably way worse than that. Okay, they're billionaires, obviously, being involved on the coast down there in Tampa. So, of course, there was some type of deal in place where they said, look, we'll make sure it doesn't get hit so we could start feeding the propaganda out right after the hurricane, how all the houses surrounding the area, which they go out of their way in the article to show you all the houses that are destroyed right around the area. But these just sit perfectly. In fact, they look like they got a power wash. They look perfect. Look like somebody got some Windex and cleaned it up real nice for the photo op, so that they could tell you that. Can you believe it? These carbon emissions homes are hurricane proof. Wow, that is really convenient. So it goes on to say they also boost some of the most sustainable, energy efficient, and hurricane proof homes in the country. The streets surrounding the homes are intentionally designed to flood so houses don't. Power and internet lines are buried to avoid wind damage. The sturdy concrete walls, hurricane-proof windows, and doors are fortified with a layer of foam insulation, providing extra safety against the most violent storms. Climate resiliency and storm protection were built into the fabric of the homes, and while the newly developed homes have endured a few storms since people moved in around February 2023, Hurricanes Helene and Milton put those features to the true test over the last 2 weeks. Most of the residents living in Hunters Point heeded the mandatory evacuations ahead of Milton's landfall, but 76-year-old couple decided to truck it out. They decided to stay there during the hurricane and then, conveniently a few days after, give an immediate interview to CNN. I guess they called CNN and said, hey, we survived because we have these climate homes that we paid $1.6 million for. Can we get an article written about us? Because this is our main concern after the entire area around us has been completely wiped out. All right? Because that makes sense. But again, people don't think like that. So they must have just went down there knocking on doors, and they happened to find the one guy who stayed during the storm, because it says that there was mandatory evacuations and everybody but this one couple left, and they happened to notify CNN that this couple stayed, and they wanted to immediately interview them. I mean, give me a break. Propaganda 101, anyone? So this couple stocked up on water and groceries. They moved the car to higher ground. They tied up all the patio and deck furniture. They brought everything from the garage inside, which made up the entire ground floor, up to the living spaces on the second floor in the event of a worst case scenario. And he says, quote, I'm just quite convinced that the strength and everything in this house, they built a great house, a strong house. And I just feel comfortable. I feel like we're high enough up, even if we get a storm surge. And of course, the house is conveniently built with all this net zero stuff that, they don't need to worry about. Another common person, again, hears that. They have no idea what this means. But they'll start getting marketed this dystopia the same way we see them marketing most of this stuff to us, right? I always make comparisons to the hilarious pharmaceutical commercials where they have somebody running on the beach and they're talking about a better life and they're reading about 9,000 side effects that can kill you while they're doing it. And it shows you what a dystopia we live in because people don't even pay attention. They're like, hey, are you having ED? And the guy's running and holding his wife's hand and he's, oh yeah, well, we could cure that. And then they're, oh, it's romantic. The sun's setting. And like, but you'll have permanent diarrhea. Your brain might implode. You might catch fire in your sleep. But don't worry about any of it. Everything's great in this dystopian hell that we're living in. Right? The same thing will be done with this smart homes that people are building out on their own. The more they start telling you that, well, it's carbon emission, carbon free, they'll put a nice backdrop behind it. Everybody will be wearing white clothing. They'll show you a beach backdrop, tell you how safe it is, that you don't have to worry about your windows getting blown in. Well, you won't have to worry about your windows getting blown in because when everybody moves into these prisons, these encampments, the government won't hit you with weaponized weather anymore. So you won't even know that you have hurricane-proof windows or not because maybe the government will run a couple storms at you. so that they could say, look how great we are. We're protecting you in these net zero homes. And you could say, gosh, I love my government, because you'll never realize that your government's the one hitting you with the hurricanes in the first place. And they won't hit you with one strong enough to rip your roof off, because they want you to live in your dystopian prison so you could serve them, because that's how this whole thing works, right? So Milton knocked out the power of more than 2.5 million customers across the state. But for this couple and their neighbors, the lights stayed on. They said, quote, everyone around us was completely dark at like 5 a.m. And you see the lights on in our houses. Well, that's convenient. I mean, I thought at first everybody had left. That's what they just told us with the emergency evacuations, except for this couple. But I guess, you expect people to have their lights on when they're not home. Hi, this ain't Motel 6, okay? So residents who stayed through both hurricanes told CNN they suffered no damage. Neither the heavy surge flooding from Helene nor the strong winds from Milton did not devastate their homes. Solar power and battery storage kept the lights on all night the following days. I hope people take a hard look at all of this and start paying attention to what goes on here. Everything's changing, referring to the storms that he's now seeing every year. They said it was imperative when they designed these homes that they could withstand Category 5 hurricanes. Each of the 3-story homes are designed like this. The ground floor is a garage. Look, they're telling you how your prison's going to look, the whole layout of your prison, because it's all going to look the same. I mean, they call these the Hunters Point homes. They might as well call them the FEMA homes. Maybe FEMA Hunters Point, I'm not sure. But they give you the whole rundown on how they're designed. I don't need to read you that part. But the property also sits in a major flood zone, which meant the homes needed to be elevated to meet Florida's building codes. The developers went above and beyond. They went above and beyond the required 3 feet to fill the dirt and used 7 feet instead to be safe. The idea is that if water can come into the garage, which is fine, but we have the flood beds, which are specifically there for that, there's still 9 feet of garage. Did you notice all this stuff about the garage? Okay, do you know why they're telling you about, well, the water did come into the garage and how the guy took his car and put it high up? Now, I don't know about you. Do you guys have a tree that you can go put your car in every time a storm comes through? Because your electric vehicle will likely combust. That's the common sense thesis here. These electric vehicles are catching fire in these hurricanes, right? So what they didn't really tell you, but they did, was that this guy had to take, a 76-year-old man had to get his car up in high ground, okay? And he wasn't saying he had to get his car up in high ground because he didn't want his engine to flood and didn't want to have to, the car to be completely totaled. He had to get his car up to high ground because his home would have caught fire and burnt to the ground if his electric vehicle was stored in the garage. That's, some of the stuff that they don't tell you about electric vehicles. Because remember, the whole point is to get you enslaved with this stuff so they can control your movements 24/7. So they say these features come at a cost. They are expensive. They're selling from 1.4 to 1.9 million, but eventually they'll be free for all of us. Because remember, the TVs, phones were really expensive at first, but they got to make sure you have them in your hand. That's why they literally have Ryan Reynolds peddling phones that they'll give you for free now, right? And that's why the government's come out and said one of their top priorities is have the internet hooked up all around the earth. Well, it's not for your convenience to do a Google search. It's to hook you up to the internet of bodies. So they say in a climate change ravaged future, Hunters Point residents say they need to prepare for what's to come, underscoring more homes need to be built and designed this way. Of course they do. Solar batteries and the way we construct homes will be part of the future because we see it's performing. The world is changing, and this is the test people are waiting to see. Well, of course. So we thank the government for steering the storms away from these homes. Now, people will never believe that because they'll say, well, the homes around them got knocked out. What are you saying? That they steered it just around this community? That's exactly what I'm saying to a T. Just like how this article conveniently came out right after the storms, as if somebody at CNN was sitting around waiting to write a story about net zero. Of course they were, because they were told right after the storm, we want you to promote these specific homes here, how they're built, how it's net zero, how, carbon emissions are the problem now. Hurricanes aren't hitting homes, apparently, that are net zero. And then they're saying, well, they are hitting them, but these homes are built so much stronger. Well, then why don't people just build their homes stronger and still not go to net zero? They didn't explain that part, right? They are building homes with hurricane-proof windows and all this other stuff. They didn't hit it the way that they hit the other regions on purpose. That's all that it comes down to, right? But they'll market this to people and they'll fall for it because most people are actually suckers, and people out there can't read between the lines as to why his car had to be put up at some high elevation somewhere, not in his garage. Is that something that you had planned? If you hear a hurricane's coming, you're thinking, oh, I got to border up my windows and my door, and I need food, I need water. Are you thinking about, I better get my car out of the garage because I don't want my house to burn to the ground in addition to actually being flooded, because that's what will actually occur. But they don't tell you those things. Unbelievable, folks. So every one of these stories, you'll always see an agenda. And this one, well, the lights staying on in that net zero storm-proof community. You better move into one soon, because your prison awaits you. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.